This is the image they tried to bury: 5 corporate logos, 5 American giants. Their names stripped from office towers in Houston, Detroit, and Charlotte, now being mounted on gleaming new headquarters in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. As of 6 a.m. this morning, Wednesday, February 25th, 2026, the largest corporate exodus in North American history is officially underway. For the first time since the War of 1812, American economic power is physically crossing the northern border, and this time nobody fired a shot. These companies did it voluntarily. We're talking about $78 billion in combined market capitalization. We're talking about 43,000 American jobs. We're talking about 5 Fortune 500 companies that looked at the United States, the world's most powerful economy, and said, "No, thank you. We'll do business in Canada instead." This is not just a relocation. This is a repudiation. And it happened faster than anyone thought possible. President Trump, already reeling from the Japan bond crisis, plummeting poll numbers, and an ongoing constitutional standoff with New York State over his personal assets, woke up this morning to the worst economic headline of his presidency. Sources inside the West Wing describe the atmosphere as apocalyptic. The president is reportedly demanding emergency executive orders to block the departures, threatening to invoke the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to freeze corporate assets, and shouting at his trade advisor over tariffs that were supposed to bring companies home, not push them north. Before we break this down, if you want to stay ahead of stories like this, subscribe to the channel now. You'll get full updates as this unfolds. In this special report, we're going to do 3 things. 1, we'll identify exactly which companies are leaving and why. 2, we'll explain the financial mechanics behind a corporate inversion exodus. And 3, we'll show why Canada executed the most devastating economic ambush since OPEC. And ultimately, we'll answer the question nobody in Washington wants to ask: is this the beginning of the end of American economic supremacy? Buckle up. The empire is hemorrhaging. To understand why 5 CEOs made the most radical decision in American corporate history, you have to trace the last 18 months. It begins with tariffs. In late 2025, the Trump administration imposed a sweeping new tariff regime on Canadian imports, a 25% blanket duty covering lumber, aluminum, auto parts, and more. The stated goal: punish Canada for unfair trade practices and force a renegotiation of the USMCA. Here's what the administration did not anticipate. Canada didn't fold. Canada retaliated. And then Canada did something far more consequential. It recruited. According to leaked documents obtained by the Financial Times, the Canadian government launched a classified initiative called Project Magnet. Starting September 2025, the program, jointly run by Innovation Canada and the Department of Finance, offered an unprecedented incentive package for American corporations willing to relocate their headquarters north of the border. We're talking a 12.5% corporate tax rate for the first 10 years, compared with 21% in the U.S. zero tariff exposure to the European Union through Canada's CETA trade agreement. Expedited immigration visas for up to 5,000 employees per company. Subsidized commercial real estate in economic zones across Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, and Ottawa. Total value, according to Canadian Finance Ministry sources, exceeds $14 billion in combined tax breaks, grants, and infrastructure support. This was not a suggestion. It was a hostile economic recruitment campaign designed to exploit the vulnerabilities created by American trade policy. Let's name the companies. Specifics matter more than narrative. Target 1, Stellantis, North America. The automaker, furious over the 25% tariffs on Canadian-made parts for its Detroit assembly lines, announced Tuesday it will relocate its North American headquarters from Auburn Hills, Michigan, to Windsor, Ontario. The irony is stark. Windsor is literally across the river from Detroit. Stellantis employees will see their old offices from the new ones. The move affects 8,200 jobs and $19 billion in market capitalization. The CEO told the board the tariff math was simple. Staying in the U.S. costs $2.3 billion annually in duties. moving to Canada saves $1.8 billion and opens tariff-free EU access. Target 2. Dow Chemical. Midland, Michigan-based chemical giant moving to Sarnia, Ontario, across from Port Huron. Dow's exposure to tariffs was catastrophic, $740 million annually on crossbow chemical shipments alone. Canada offered a dedicated chemical processing corridor with subsidized energy from Ontario Hydro. The move affects 6,400 jobs and $38 billion in market capitalization. Board quote, "The American regulatory and tariff environment has become hostile to chemical manufacturing." Target 3. Magna International's U.S. division. Originally Canadian, Magna had expanded massively into the U.S. Over the past 2 decades, it's now moving 11,000 American employees back across the border to Aurora, Ontario, representing $9 billion in relocated economic activity. Target 4. Nutrien, the world's largest fertilizer company, moving its American hub from Deerfield, Illinois, to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. 4,200 jobs and $7 billion in associated activity affected. Target 5. Brookfield Asset Management, relocating its New York City office back to Toronto, returning $5 billion in assets under management to Bay Street. 5 companies, 5 exits, 5 holes in American economic fabric that will not stitch themselves shut. But here's the catch nobody is discussing. These 5 are just the first wave. A confidential U.S. Chamber of Commerce survey leaked to Bloomberg Tuesday night reveals 23 additional Fortune 500 companies conducting active relocation studies. Automotive, aerospace, pharmaceuticals, agribusiness, all evaluating Canadian, Mexican, or European alternatives. CEO confidence in U.S. trade policy is at 22%, the lowest since the index was created in 1987. That should terrify you more than any headline. Now, the financial mechanics. Corporate relocation is not just changing the letterhead. When Stellantis moves to Windsor, every subsidiary, holding company, and intellectual property portfolio is restructured under Canadian law. Transfer pricing shifts profits previously taxed at 21% in the U.S. to Canada at 12.5%. Multiply across 5 companies. The CBO estimates a $12.4 billion annual loss in federal tax revenue. Every year, gone, not funding Social Security, Medicare, or defense, directly out of American taxpayers' pockets. Secondary effects are worse. Dow Chemical leaves Midland, the town of 42,000 collapses economically. Dow is the largest employer, taxpayer, and civic donor. Property taxes projected to drop 34% within 18 months. Schools lose funding, hospitals lose anchor tenants, small businesses lose revenue overnight. Same pattern in Auburn Hills, Deerfield, and Detroit. The Brookings Institution estimates the secondary economic impact exceeds $131 billion, factoring in supply chain disruption, reduced consumer spending, and property devaluation. And here's the national security angle. Dow Chemical produces chemical precursors used in defense. Stellantis builds vehicles under military contracts. Nutrien controls 22% of North American fertilizer supply, critical for food security. When headquarters move to Canada, these companies answer to Canadian regulators and courts. Pentagon memo leaks describe Dow relocation as a potential vulnerability in the defense industrial base requiring immediate review. White House response escalates risk. Sources report the president convened the National Economic Council at 4 a.m., a 3-hour emergency meeting. By 7 a.m., he reportedly overruled every economist, demanded legal mechanisms to physically prevent corporate departures, floated invoking the IEEPA, the same statute used against terrorist organizations, to block companies leaving a NATO ally. Legal scholars call this unprecedented. IEEPA requires a declared national emergency based on extraordinary threat. Corporate relocation does not meet that threshold. Economic context. Japan bond crisis cratered markets. $4.2 trillion lost in 3 weeks. Dollar index down 8% since December. Consumer confidence at a 14-year low. Corporate exodus accelerates economic bleeding. Connection missed by media. The Japan bond crash and corporate exodus are the same crisis expressed differently. Bond implosion triggered global risk repricing. Borrowing costs jumped 180 basis points in 2 weeks. For capital-intensive companies like Dow and Stellantis, this made tariff exposure unbearable. Canada, meanwhile, cut rates 50 basis points while the Fed held steady. Tax incentives plus interest rate differential created a gravitational pull no fiduciary-bound CEO could resist. Math: stay in U.S., 21% tax, 25% tariffs, 6.8% borrowing, move to Canada, 12.5% tax, 0 EU tariffs, 4.1% borrowing. 5-year savings, $9 billion for a company like Dow. No board leaves $9 billion on the table to satisfy presidential ego. Worst case, cascade. Goldman Sachs modeling, 25-30 Fortune 500 companies relocate, triggering $48 billion annual federal tax loss, $122 billion state revenue collapse, 15% S&P 500 decline over 6 months, 401ks, pensions, retirement savings hit on top of Japan losses. Wall Street. Capital has no patriotism. It goes where math works. Right now, math doesn't work in America. Canadian perspective. Prime Minister Mark Carney, former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor, designed Project Magnet as surgical economic strategy. America pushed them away, he reportedly told Cabinet. We simply held the door open. Chinese state media broadcasts the exodus as front-page news. Signal. If U.S. companies don't trust policy, why should foreign investors? Domestic impact. MAGA base divided. Some see corporate betrayal, confirming globalist CEOs chase lower taxes. Others, union workers and factory employees, watch jobs vanish under the president who promised economic nationalism. 43,000 American workers relocating or laid off. Coalition cracks at the center. History. Economic power once migrated rarely returns. Protectionism rarely reverses capital flight. Economic gravity favors the path of least resistance. Right now, that path leads north. Founding context. Alexander Hamilton, Federalist number 12, argued commerce is the source of national wealth. When commerce leaves, strength leaves. Tax base shrinks. Innovation ecosystem collapses. Talent follows capital. This is a stress test, not of one president, not of one party, but of the American economic model itself. Can a nation maintain dominance when corporations voluntarily fly a foreign flag? Thursday, watch list, White House Executive Order, IEEPA draft circulating, legal challenges expected from ACLU, Chamber of Commerce, companies, constitutional confrontation likely, market reaction, futures down 340 points, Goldman Sachs recommends industrial sector sell-off, Federal Reserve options bleak, cut rates, risk inflation, hold, risk recession, raise, risk depression. Canada. Carney scheduled to announce Project Magnet Phase 2 targeting U.S. tech giants. Google, Apple, Microsoft relocations could dwarf today's $78 billion exodus. For 43,000 American workers, moving trucks are already loaded. For millions more, uncertainty begins. Tariffs designed to protect jobs built a bridge to Canada, flowing only one way. Subscribe. Stay tuned. The geography of American power is being redrawn in real time. Washington does not have a map. The empire does not fall to invaders. Sometimes it simply packs up, crosses the border, and never looks back.